What's up, guys? It's Rey-Jay back with another video. And in this one, I want to break down what's happening with SPY, Tsla, Nvda, the QQQ, and a couple of other tickers. I'm also going to talk about why there's going to be a big test coming to the markets for tomorrow and some very key things to watch for. I believe there's going to be a big move that's coming. And it's going to hinge upon where the market ends up attempting to bounce, if we try to bounce off a key level or not. So I'll be talking about what that level is and how this could end up looking at these charts and other factors. But just know that I am not a financial planner, so make sure you take nothing I say as financial advice whatsoever. And also, if you guys can, please check out my Moomoo link. If you deposit $100, you're guaranteed 5 free stocks. If you deposit $1,000, you're guaranteed 15 in total, not to mention 8.1% APY on invested cash. The offer ends very soon in just a couple of weeks. Anyways, now let's talk about what's happening with the market. So looking at SPY, we have this nice double top leg structure that's been developing. And this was a very, very beautiful trade setup. But the issue with SPY is the fact that despite the fact that we started to dip, we did see buyers attempting to defend our 20 EMA right here today. So we saw SPY trying to bounce here, which made it look like it was trying to get back up to these highs. But instead, as we approached the end of the day, the market rejected again. And we ended up failing to close above our 20 EMA. So this now opens the door for more downside, especially as a lot of tech stocks are looking weaker, which could signify more downside is coming. However, despite the downside that could be coming, there might be a little bit more, but the market has not lost critical support yet. We haven't lost the lows from Tuesday. We also haven't not lost our 50 EMA on the 4-hour time frame. So the supports still remain. We'll be watching these supports being tested as soon as tomorrow, most likely, and we'll have to see if SPY could bounce off of these levels or not. If it doesn't, there will be a lot more downside coming. If it does, if we do get that bounce, then we're going to be completely fine. So I'll talk about what those levels are in just a couple of minutes and why there's going to be a big test for tomorrow. Just know this, as far as the market has been going, the market started off in a very, very interesting trend. First off, we got this sell-off thanks to PPI. The PPI numbers were not good. And then the market attempted to rebound only to get a big rejection as time went on. And then we ended up seeing Google. We saw Oracle. Meta was in the red. So was Nvda, Amzn. The majority of big tech stocks and finance, these sectors were in the red, getting these massive rejections. So the majority of stocks have been in the red. I don't think that this is the best of news, at least for the bulls out there. And I think that all these big tech stocks are going to be looking for some big tests for tomorrow. And I'll talk about what those levels are as well. So why did the market dip the way it did? Well, today's Thursday. We just had PPI data. And unfortunately, PPI was not too good. PPI month over month was at 0.4%. That was above expectations, at least somewhat. It wasn't that bad. That was just by 0.1%. And then core PPI month over month was at 0.2%. So that was aligned with expectations. Initial jobless claims was above expectations, which wasn't that good. And then the main reasons why the market sold off were these two things. We had core PPI year over year at 3.4%. So that was above the consensus in the forecast. Not too good. And then the worst thing was this. We had PPI year over year for the month of November at 3%. This is above the 2.6% target. So PPI basically is like CPI except for the producer side, and producer costs have gone up. So inflation is going up, at least for these producers. The rate at which prices are going up is what had increased a little bit more. And that works in the opposite of what the Fed wants. So not the best of news. This could have a negative effect on CPI in the future. Not a guarantee, though, so we'll see about that. But just know that because PPI year over year was a little bit of an increase above expectations by 0.4%, that is what fueled the market to sell off. At least that was one of the bigger factors. Now, we had Donald Trump ringing the bell, but that didn't really affect the market. So the market, just continued to do its thing despite that. And now going into Friday, there's not really much coming out. We just have export and import prices. But there's nothing else that's too crazy that's coming out. Now, for other factors out there, when it comes to SPY, just know this. Tomorrow, max pain is going to be at a 597 with a 1.43 put to call ratio. As you guys can see, we have about 400,000 calls in total that are expiring. And then we have about very close to about 600,000 of these puts expiring. That's why we have a 1.43 put to call ratio. So we'll see what this leads to. So the thing about this is that the market makers would be in a good place if they do get us to dip closer to max pain. This might change tomorrow and get closer to like 600. And that could fuel a little bit more selling. So just keep that in mind. There is that risk that still exists for the markets. For earnings, we just had Costco announce their earnings. As you guys can see, Costco is not doing that great. Very mixed earnings. We had about a 4.04 or $4.04 earnings per share. That's above estimations of $3.97. $3.79 a share. Excuse me, guys. Sorry about that. And then we also saw their overall revenue at about $62.2 billion. That was missing the expectations of $66.5 billion. So despite sales going up a little bit, their revenue was a small miss, and then everything else was just so-so, with some things being a little bit lackluster, such as their sales report. That's why Costco is flat, if not a little bit in the red. So unfortunately for Costco, it didn't really make a nice move. Now the market's neutral right now. We're going to be watching to see, do we get closer to greed or do we get closer to fuel, closer to fear? We'll have to see about that, as we're still kind of stuck in the middle. Momentum is still at greed. That's making up the majority of sentiment right now. We'll see if this shifts closer to neutral or not, but momentum is slowing down a bit. The puts and call option ratio is at extreme greed right now. This is very important because there's a lot of people who are continuing to close their shorts, and there's still a lot of buyers who are present. But the question is, if the market dips more, will this start shifting upwards to lead to more bearish momentum? We'll have to see about that. We're not ready yet. The VIX is also down here. We're going to be watching to see if that shifts, but for now, we're just kind of stuck. That being said, what do I see at least for the market moving forward? Well, SPY is completely range bound. We have this 602 area as our main support, and we have this resistance around this 608 area. We're going back and forth and back and forth, and I anticipate that we look a little bit weaker here, at least on the 4-hour time frame, especially as you're looking at big tech and a lot of these other stocks. They do look like they have a little bit more downside coming, which makes me presume that SPY might dip a little bit more. Now, hypothetically, just watch these levels. If we get back above 605.5, there could be an attempt to get back up to 606. And if that level breaks, then we're going to be looking for the highs of the day to be retested in the 607.5 area. If we lose our support at 604, we're looking for 603.08. This is going to be our 50 EMA. If that fails us, we have the lows from Tuesday to be tested. We got to hold that, or else this thing is going to be dumping to 605.98. Okay, so lose 602 to 603, we turn more bearish. We're looking for a dump. But if we get a bounce and we reclaim 606, we could turn back up. What do I think is going to happen? Here's my view. I think that with this rejection right here, this imbalance is going to drag us lower. And there's a risk of SPY coming a little bit lower to about 603. So please keep that in mind. There's a little bit of weakness building here. Also, when you look at the daily time frame, we look like we got this big rejection here. So the market has this very tough resistance around 609. And instead of coming back up, we've continued to reject. So this could be another attempt to come back down. And we might be looking for a test of 603 or so. I think the 603s will most likely be coming. So please keep that in mind. So looking at the chart, for example, on the 4-hour, there is going to be that risk of us dipping a little bit lower, especially as we start to see new developments. So I think the most likely case is that we get very close to 603 to 604 flat. If we bounce off this and reclaim 606 afterwards, we will turn back to bullish. If we can't do that, if we end up losing this support, look for a bigger rug pull back down to 602, then potentially down to 600. I hope that's as clear as possible. So look for a small dip tomorrow, closer to 603 to 604 flat. I think we're going to be dipping a little bit more, but we have to see if we bounce off our 50 EMA or not. So be prepared for some downside that's coming to the markets, and we'll see if we bounce or not. It could go either way. This does look like a double top, and the market's kind of struggling to break past 609. So it makes me kind of favor downside a little bit more, but we'll see about that just to be safe, because it is a very tricky market. And tomorrow happens to be Friday, which is full of manipulation. The market has a range between 602 and 609. Like I said before, we're just going back and forth and back and forth. So in this case, we're going to be looking for a test of the lower end of the range, and we'll have to see if we continue to go back and forth from here. Here are some levels to watch for. I just presume we're going to be coming down to this range here before we try to see a bounce, possibly. And then if we don't get the bounce, there's going to be a bigger rug pull. But look for some downside, and we'll see what the reaction happens to be. Now on ES, I see something very similar. Notice that ES is really struggling to get back above its 50 EMA at 60.67. This makes me presume that this might be coming down to where this imbalance happens to be at 60.50. We're stuck in the middle going back and forth and back and forth, and this is favoring downside all the way down here towards the 60.50 area. If that fails us, we could be dipping all the way down to about that 60.40 zone, and that could lead to more downside. If this holds, we could attempt to bounce, but I'm favoring that this will most likely be dipping to about 60.50, so a little bit more downside is coming where this imbalance is, and we'll have to see if the lows from Tuesday hold. If they don't hold, if 60.40 fails us, there's going to be a bigger dump coming all the way down to 60.20, if not 6,000 flat. Okay, so look for a dip tomorrow. We're going to likely come down to about 60.50 to 60.40 in this range down here. ES is going to likely reject off its 15 and come down to this support. And we'll see if we get some kind of bounce or not. Do we get some kind of bounce? We'll just have to wait and see. But I'll be watching this level very, very closely right over here just to see what kind of reaction we get. So make sure you watch the support zone right here, and then we'll see if we get a bounce. I do anticipate this is going to be tested tomorrow for a small dip, and then we'll see what the reaction happens to be. For Nvidia, Nvidia is doing a good job so far. We're trying to rebound. I think that because we closed above 138, this might outperform the market and try to push a little bit closer to about 140. And we'll see if we break that or not. Because the issue with Nvidia is the fact that we are technically making lower highs. So if you look at the last couple of days, we had a high here, came down. We did see one wick. I think this was during earnings before it came back down, and we're just continuing to make lower highs. So I think this might be pushing for 140 tomorrow. We'll see what kind of reaction we get once we hit that resistance. And we'll see what happens from there. For Bitcoin, on the other hand, has hit around this 102,000 mark. I think that we're looking for 98,800 as our main support. If that fails, this will be dipping even lower towards 97,000. And then we'll see what kind of reaction we get from here. But I think that the most likely case is that 98,800 is going to be tested, and we'll have to see what the reaction we get. And I think there's a good chance that this will be dipping a little bit more. So watch for that very closely, at least on Bitcoin. For other factors out there, we have Tesla. Tesla is it's looking a little bit weaker, unfortunately. Now, I wouldn't say Tesla is going to be looking for a huge rug pull. Do not presume that yet, because we have not lost our 20 EMA. And what I mean by that is we're riding the green line. Do you see the green line? We basically we're riding near it for quite some time. So like right here, for example, this was our support. We came down to the yellow line, our 50 EMA, and this was our support at one point. But then we were riding our 20 EMA since. We were above it very, very nicely, continuing to hold very, very well. So this makes me say that as far as Tesla goes, look for a test of 414 tomorrow. That's the previous all-time high. If that fails us, then I think we might be visiting where this green line happens to be around this 403 area. And if that fails, then yes, Tesla will be turning a little bit more bearish for a bigger dip. We need to try to bounce off 403, if not 414. Otherwise, the odds do favor the downside. And I think that there is a risk of 414, if not 403, if that fails us. So be prepared for a little bit of downside coming to Tesla, and we'll see if we bounce off one of those supports. Unfortunately, Tesla already ran so much, so a little bit of downside is completely normal. This is no surprise. There were moments where Tesla got some downside only for it to continue to push. So no surprises right here. We're completely fine. A small pullback is completely healthy. NQ has this gap down here to fill. Notice we still got a decent close on NQ. It actually held up very nicely. And we'll have to see how this ends up reacting. There is a risk of this coming down lower, though, if you look at the 4 hour, because of the fact that we had a high here. We came down, and now we made this lower high. So I think this might be coming back down to about 21,695. If that fails us, we could be looking for a retest of 21,629. But as long as we hold this, it could come down a bit and try to bounce. It still has the potential to do that. We have to lose 21,629 to turn more bearish, and we have not done that yet. So it looks like there could be a small dip before it attempts to rebound off the 21,680 area. Might be a small dip, and we'll see if it bounces. Also, the QQQ is trying to get bought back up in the after hours. It's actually holding up nicely so far. However, I would still be careful with this. We need to see this test right here. It could retest the 526 area. As long as that holds, this could attempt to bounce and make its way back up to 530. But if we lose that, there's going to be a rug pull back down to where this imbalance is around 521. Do not forget, we still have that gap at 517 that never got filled. So if we do lose the support around the 520 area, I think we fill that gap down to about 517. So please keep that in mind. I think that right now we're holding support very nicely on the QQQ. So there's a potential move to the upside that could be coming. This is looking stronger than SPY right now, but whether or not we get this bounce is going to depend on different factors. So there could be a retest of the 526 to 527 area. Then we could try to bounce for 530. If we, if we lose that, we're looking for 524, then 520 is our supports. I presume it's going to dip a little bit tomorrow around the 526 area, and we'll see if we bounce or not. It's showing more strength than SPY, so it has more potential to bounce, especially as NQ is holding up. On the other hand, we have Apple, which has like a left shoulder, head, and a right shoulder forming. I presume we're going to be testing 246. If that fails us, we easily come down to 244, if not this imbalance around 242. So I think with the head and shoulders, we favor downside for 246, and we'll see what kind of reaction we get. So give this the time it needs. For Netflix is once again, it hit this resistance at 940 and it's kind of selling off right here. We have 922 as our resistance. If that does not hold, we could be dipping all the way down towards 914. So with this bearish divergence, unfortunately, Netflix was not able to hold up despite how strong it was looking yesterday. I think that's because we closed below our 4-hour 20 EMA. This might grab liquidity in the morning for 925 before it starts to sell off more, but there's going to be a risk of 914. For MicroStrategy, we're stuck in the middle going back and forth and back and forth. We might retest 387 if not below, and we'll see if we get a bounce off 380. So give this more time to develop as we're stuck in this range. I think this might be retesting 387. If that fails us, we're looking for 380. There might be a small dip, and we'll see what kind of reaction we get from there. Celsius or CELH is looking more bullish as we're holding support very well. This is favoring this imbalance fill and a push all the way back up towards about this 32.8 area. So I anticipate more upside as a stronger possibility. For Supermicro, we look a little bit more bearish. We had a high here and we came down. We have to reclaim 40, otherwise we're at risk of coming down lower towards that 35 target, if not down to about 32. So this could be dipping lower if we don't reclaim 40, and I do anticipate a little bit more downside before we see another move. Please keep that in mind. For Palantir, we're doing a wonderful job at holding above our 20 EMA. As long as 72.5 holds tomorrow, this goes back up for about that 75 target. If it does not hold, we're looking for a move back down to 69.98 or basically 70. So I think the odds are favoring this is going to hold up and try to push up for 74 to 75. I think upside looks a little bit more probable. For Rivian, we look more bullish as we're holding our 20 EMA. If we end up losing support at this 13.8 and 13.67 area, we will be dipping, excuse me. And if that fails us, we do have this gap down here to fill. But I'm favoring that this is going to be trying to form an accumulation and try to push a little higher for 14.4. So we'll see what happens after that. For SoFi, we have this liquidity being grabbed right here. It might be retesting 15.75 or so, but it's very choppy right now. So it might dip a little bit and just continue to chop around, not really doing much. The Russell looks a lot weaker because of the fact that we're losing structure right here. We had this nice looking channel that we were stuck in for the last couple of days, going back and forth like this. This is now at risk of coming all the way down to these lower levels like 232 if 234 fails us. So please keep that in mind. We're going to most likely see a little bit more downside. For AMD, we're trying to rebound. You'll have to see if 132 breaks. If that breaks, we're looking for essentially a move back up for 135. If we end up rejecting here, we could be dipping lower, but we'll just have to see what happens. If we break 132, we're going to be looking for a pushback up for 135 just to see how things end up going. So please give this more time to develop. If we end up losing 130, we could be dipping back down for 128, but I think this is favoring 132.28 as the most likely possibility. For ARM, if we lose 150, this will be dipping back down for essentially 145. As long as we end up breaking 152, I think we could be pushing back up for essentially 155. I think the odds are favoring this is going to be pushing higher for 153. So I think that's the most likely case. A little bit more upside. For coin, we're completely range bound here, but the good thing about coin is the fact that we're making a higher low. So if it were to lose 312, we're looking for a move back down to fill this gap at 303. That's going to be one trade. But if we break past 315, we're looking for essentially the 320s. Because of this PPO, I think that the odds favor that this is going to attempt to base here, consolidate, and maybe try to push for 320. It's holding up very nicely, but just to be safe, look out for that gap. So we'll see if we end up losing 312 or not. It's very choppy right now. It could go either way. Amazon looks a little bit weaker to me. It looks like it's going to be dipping down to this imbalance. I think that Amazon might be dipping for a test of 226, and we'll see if we bounce off that or not. Very close to our 20 EMA. So look for a little bit more downside for the 226.28 area, and we'll see if we bounce. For Meta, we look a little bit more bearish. We could be dipping closer to about 622. We'll have to see how we end up reacting to this. Will we get some kind of bounce or not? For Microsoft, we could be dipping back down for about 445. We'll have to see if we bounce or not as well. We might be dipping towards that area, and we'll have to see what happens after that. For Google, we're dipping right here as well. I think that this will most likely get closer to about 190. We have to bounce off that, otherwise 187.41 is coming. So this is favoring 190, if not 187.41, if we lose 192 flats. I do believe it's going to be testing 192 at the very least for a little bit more downside. Then we'll see what kind of reaction we get. For GameStop, for those who are interested, we're just kind of choppy right now. This could attempt to get back up to 29.5, but I just think that it's very flat. It's not really doing much. Same thing with AMC. It's a little bit more bearish. It's going to try to cross on the PPO, but it's still on a bit of a downtrend. No sign of a bounce yet. I think it could make its way a little bit lower for about the 4.25 area. For DJT, I think that this could be dipping closer to about this 35.28 area. We'll see if we bounce or not. This could be dipping a little bit lower, and we'll see what kind of reaction we get. For the VIX, we're trying to rebound right here for about a 14.1. If we break this, we're going to be looking for a much bigger push. Um, if now the thing about the VIX is the fact that we're trying to reclaim our 20 EMA, so this is starting to show some potential to bounce. We tried to come down to fill this gap, but instead we bounced off gap support, so it's very tricky. This makes me think the VIX might be going for 14.11 for a small push, and then we'll see what the VIX does. Does it break 14.11 and start breaking out to because of the market is looking more bearish, or does this thing end up hitting the resistance and reject and come back down to fill this gap? It could go either way. We're waiting to see what it's going to do. The 10-year looks more bullish, could be looking to fill that gap in the 4.4 area. The dollar is also a bit more bullish. Typically, that is a little bit more of a bearish signal for the markets. The dollar has not been working as well as it used to, so we'll see about that. But that's what I'm seeing, at least for the time being. So with that being said, the market's looking a little bit more heavy. I think the Nasdaq and QQQ look a little bit stronger than SPY right now. So tomorrow their dip may be a little bit more minuscule, and right now they're looking like they're holding support very nicely. But SPY is looking a little bit weaker. There is going to be a risk of it dipping a little bit lower tomorrow to test these key supports. And we'll have to see if we get a bounce. Okay, if we don't bounce, this thing is going to get a rug pull, and we could be looking for a bigger move to the downside on SPY. The reason I'm quite indecisive is because the market's been range bound and very choppy for the last few days, and that's why we want to be watching our levels very closely. But with that being said, I thank you all so much for listening. Please have a good rest of your day. Look for a little bit more downside in the markets, especially because of what big tech is looking like. Then we'll see what kind of reaction we get. I appreciate you guys for your attention, and peace out.